In dementia units, most people, most of the time, can understand you, but they can't necessarily communicate with you because they may not have the verbal ability or the vocab ability to be able to do that. There's such a vast range of cognition and verbal ability and communication function in a dementia unit. So just to go through the range, those people that are aphasic, who cannot speak but can understand. Then there's the group who are aphasic, who get confused a lot of the time. Then there's the group who are shut down, shut off, who can communicate but don't and have a limited vocabulary. And then there are those who are articulate, highly articulate, good communicators, just with direction orientation problems. So putting all these people into one big classroom, so to speak, is really a huge challenge. And it's remarkable that they manage as well as they do. So how do they manage in terms of their communication and understanding each other? Well, it's right through from gestures, facial expressions, smiles, nods of the head, shake of the head, and of course right through to good, clear communication. So in terms of how they help each other, it is completely different actually between the men and the women as well, and character, personality, history, experience, education, everything comes into it. But in terms of the females who had been school teachers, for example, they often befriended one another and they'd sit in the activities just like a classroom. So for the activities, whether it's the newspaper reading or a workshop, the school teachers pretty much partook in it as they did in the classroom. So if someone wasn't paying attention or who was nodding off or sleeping, they'd, nudge them in the side and say, come on, wake up, pay attention. Or if they weren't focusing, they'd say, oh, can't they find an interest in something? Surely they can find an interest in something, do something. So to them, it was just a natural ability, cognition, thinking, speaking, partaking, and they encouraged and inspired others to do the same and were supportive of each other as well, actually. In time, when they made friends with each other, and that does take time, when they befriended each other in the group, that was when they started to encourage each other. So that if one of the ladies who had not been speaking for quite some time made a comment, then the school teachers would compliment them, praise them and say, oh, very good, well done, that's great, keep it up. So that was the way that the women encouraged each other to speak. Now the men were quite different because the men, for some reason in dementia units, don't befriend each other in the same way that women do. Women, quite easily make friends, not easily, but they'll connect relatively easily in dementia units, especially if they've been of the same career. So school teachers tend to band with school teachers and nurses with nurses. And of course, staff encourage that because they know from the clinical notes what career the person's had, and families encourage it as well. So that like former careered residents will sit at the same dining table, for example, and that's always a good way to make friends. But men, of course, are the minority by far. You're lucky to have a quarter of the residents men and 3/4 women. So they've got a smaller pool to choose from in terms of making friends. But I found men didn't really make friends with each other. They made friends with the women, but with the men, I don't know whether it was competitiveness or they just like to be doing something. They didn't like to be sitting down and just talking. They didn't find that was constructive. They'd rather be doing something active. They tended to walk around the dementia unit trying to find something of interest, much more so than the women. So women, I think, are just used to sitting down and having a cup of tea and a cake and a chat, but men don't like doing that. So, well, they certainly didn't in the dementia units I was at. So they didn't make friends as a result, but they were friendly with the other men and friendly, certainly with the women, and certainly helpful, but it was just a different type of connection. The men, for example, would always be, the social men were always, and most men really, were very friendly to the women and would greet everyone when they met them. And some men would specifically go around and greet all the women in the unit, make a point of it, saying, good morning, how are you, dear, and a little pat on the back. And some were less gregarious and would just greet the person that was directly in front of them. But most were social. I'd say the majority, 75%, 80% were social to all the other women. And then some went well out of their way in specific areas. There was one man who was very good with the unwell woman. I don't know if he'd really done that much in his life. I don't think he had, because he'd been out at sea most of his life on yachts and ships and boats and things, but he was very good with the unwell woman. And he said to the staff, he'd go up to the staff at the desk and he'd say, is there any way that I can help? Incredible. I want to help, he said, how can I help? And in the end, the staff put him with the very unwell woman. They lie in the recliner chairs, you know, and there's generally one, maybe two at the unit at any given time. And they would get him to sit with these unwell ladies. And he'd say, I'm just going to sit here. I won't say anything unless they want to speak, but I'll just be here to support. And that's what he did. Really, he'd sit there with these unwell women and he'd just be patiently supportive and just maybe put his hand on their hand if they liked that. Otherwise, he'd just sit on his own with them, keeping them company. And that was, his wife never alluded to the fact that he was like that. He was actually quite the opposite, really. He was, you know, a sailor. And so it was remarkable that he came out with this skill. There must have been something within his nature which gave him that ability, because he was incredibly compassionate. So that was the way that he helped and communicated in a minimal way with the women. Other men greeting daily, and some men did come to the workshops and participate and partake. And of course the women loved that, because they love male company in dementia units, because there are not many men around. So any man that comes to the workshop will be appreciated, especially if he has big strong shoulders and can push the chairs around so that he can, you know, get friends sitting by friends, and, you know, chairs in sunlight with sunshine and warmth. Because the chairs are too big for frail women or even averagely built women in their 80s and 90s to move. They're really big chairs. So if the men can move them around to the women's liking, that's always a big plus. And of course, men are loved for that, included in the group, and that's their way of being able to come in and get their connection with the group for those men that have been prior farmers. So there's lots of different ways that people communicate. But really it's, you know, generous spiritedness, good-heartedness and goodwill, really, that's at the back of it. I mean, there are a few residents that don't partake and that just, you know, keep on the outer rim, so to speak, 20% maybe, and they just sort of sit in the back corner, maybe come to the activities, but second row, don't communicate, don't partake. Could speak, could communicate. They are doing quizzes. This one woman, she was very good at quizzes. She was a university lecturer prior, intelligent, bright, understood everything, never said a word. Never said a word. I never understood it. I think she was just, something had happened. I think she was embittered, either with coming into the unit or some relationship stress in the past or something. But she never warmed to the group or the staff, even though people made a lot of effort with her. So there's a vast range, and still it has to come from the person, whether they wish to communicate with each other and, you know, befriend each other. So I've written about all these topics at length in the two books, The Resident's Voice and The Resident's Rise, both on Amazon and my website. Thank you for your looks, likes, and please pass on the links. Thank you.